Last night, I had a warm conversation with President-elect Barack Obama. I congratulated him and Senator Biden on their impressive victory. I told the President-elect he can count on complete cooperation from my administration as he makes the transition to the White House.
President George W. Bush there speaking a little more than 12 years ago, hours after Barack Obama won the 2008 election. Bit of a contrast with the current White House and the incoming administration. One thing remains the same, though, the mechanics of that transition and the Electoral College vote, which is wrapping up. Peter Rao was an official in the Bush White House back then. He's now an analyst with the Hudson Institute and joins us from Washington. Hi, Mr. Rao. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks for having me on.
Before we get into your time and your experience with transitions, I did want to ask you about some breaking news out of the United States that happened on our watch this evening, and that is the resignation of Bill Barr, the U.S. Attorney General. He's going to be replaced by his deputy, Jeff Rosen, according to the president, who tweeted the news. Any surprise on your part to that? I know you've read the resignation letter, but Mr. Barr had certainly come out a few weeks ago with a view about the validity of the election that contrasted that which President Trump has put forward.
Well, it's of note that he doesn't mention whether or not he's resigning or had been dismissed. But beyond that, the resignation letter is brimming with praise for the Trump administration, and the president also in his Twitter message praised the work of the Attorney General. So it looks like he's leaving on good terms, irrespective why he's leaving, whether it be a dismissal or a resignation. But we're in the very late stages of the Trump administration. Looks like Attorney General Barr is going to be able to spend some quality time with his family on Christmas. And then we have only a few more weeks until the inauguration.
From your perspective, does it change anything, and only insofar as the Department of Justice had conducted some investigation, some level of investigation into whether or not there had been fraud in the elections? And that is what Mr. Barr had talked about a couple weeks ago, that he had not yet found any evidence. We had a guest earlier who said this certainly allows for the Department of Justice, should they want to pursue, or the person in charge of it want to pursue some additional investigations, to do so. Do you think that's likely to happen?
Well, I think the Attorney General has been very thorough. I'm sure the president's instructed him, and he's taken it upon himself to try to ensure confidence in the vote. And so he's pursued every lead that's been available to ensure the sanctity of the vote is guaranteed for all Americans so that they can trust the electoral process. And if his deputy, the number two, who now assumes the duties as acting Attorney General, does the same, I'm not sure he'll be able to find much more than the Attorney General has already attempted to lock down. So sure, the Justice Department has in its right, in its remit, to pursue these sorts of charges. But in the end, the question is, where's the evidence which is necessary to show voter fraud on the level that some have said or have accused there to have been.
So let me circle back to that clip that we played off the top there of your old boss. What goes through your head as you hear that and think back to that time of transition?
Well, President Bush, when he was transitioning out of office, or perhaps more so Bush administration officials, thought back to their own transition into office 8 years earlier in the year 2000, which is now 20 years ago, not just 12 years ago. And that really was somewhat of a bitter transition. There are legion anecdotes, many of them I'm sure apocryphal, but they've entered into Washington lore, one of which is that when they arrived on the scene on day one, the W's had been plucked out of the computers by outgoing Clinton administration officials, W, of course, being a stand-in for George W. Bush. And so President Bush really wanted to make sure that President Obama had a smooth transition. President Obama graciously in his inaugural address thanked President Bush for his generosity, I think, as he put it. And I think maybe one difference between President Bush and President Trump, I mean, there are many, but one is that President Bush himself wasn't on the ballot in the year 2008. Of course, it felt like something of a repudiation for the Democratic Party candidate, Barack Obama, to beat the Republican candidate, John McCain. But nonetheless, it wasn't George W. Bush on the ballot. You have to remember, this is only the second time in a century that an incumbent president's party has had to leave the White House after just 4 years, Jimmy Carter being the other. And the last time that an incumbent president lost the vote was 1992, 1993. So it couldn't have been a surprise given the public polling for the Trump orbit. But nonetheless, I'm sure it stung. And I think those frustrations are showing today.
Taking that all into account, and even taking those frustrations into account, are you surprised at all at how this continues to drag out, at least on the surface? And I take into account also that I know behind the scenes the work has begun and did start a few weeks ago with the transition, the mechanics of the transition, but just publicly facing how long it's taking.
Well, I think the letter of the law is being held in. That's what really matters. The president has ensured that Vice President Biden gets his presidential daily brief. As you say, the landing teams have landed in the agencies and in the departments to begin the process of transition, which is really important in the American system because the top layer, something like 4,000 political appointees, are appointed by the president and take over command of government with the career bureaucrats layered beneath them. So they need time to work their way into their job. As for the president and his comments, it really doesn't surprise me. No one really knows how Donald Trump thinks other than Donald Trump. And so I think part of this is what he said the day before the election at his last stop at his campaign headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. I really don't like to lose when he was prompted by a reporter how he would handle it. And we'll see how that goes. I also think President Trump is angling for the future. I mean, politics really doesn't deal with the past. It deals with the present and looks into the future. And so he's been able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in the last month to fund his political operations post January 20th. He's already leaked to the press that he's considering 2024 as a potential race in 4 years. And so all of this keeps Trumpism, as it were, not just the theory, but also the person alive in the minds of American politics.
And so what are the implications of that for example, Joe Biden? He's set to speak in about 40 minutes time, 35 minutes time. We expect to take those remarks live following the outcome of what happens with the Electoral College. But certainly he will have to contend with the remnants, however large they are, of Trumpism going forward as well.
Well, I'll take you back to where I started, to the year 2000, 20 years ago. And Democratic operatives back then believed that they made a huge mistake in not putting Vice President Gore, when he was contesting the election, out in front of the cameras earlier on election night, because the narrative became very quickly that he had lost the vote. And they were always, in their minds, playing catch up to George W. Bush and the ensuing legal battles. Joe Biden on election night came out very early and made a pretty demonstrative statement, even before President Trump got before the cameras. And so I think the speech tonight is just another effort, another attempt by Vice President Biden to cloak himself in the mantle of the presidency, to try to give himself legitimacy. Legitimacy of the presidency is very important. I mean, think back over the last 4 years. The Russia collusion charge really damaged President Trump. It robbed him of political capital. Many people claimed he wasn't a legitimate president in 2016, even after we had a special prosecutor investigate that claim and debunk it. And so Joe Biden wants to cloak himself in the presidency, show that he, in fact, is the president-elect. And tonight, after the Electoral College totals, with Hawaii coming in last, give out their final tally and their final count, which will then go to Congress to read out on January 6th. I think the vice presidency is another opportunity to claim the presidency and to really imprint himself in the minds of Americans as the 46th president of the United States.
Okay, Mr. Rao, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time this evening. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me. Peter
Rao is with the Hudson Institute, rather. He's a former official in the George W. Bush White House. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.